On today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we bring back the public address voice for the Florida Panthers, Andrew Imber, on this edition. Let's chat.
Can't wait, man.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Tuesday, October 4th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Don't forget to also subscribe to Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steele Roden, and Locked On NHL, where we'll be covering all the preseason activities around the National Hockey League. So, Cats fans, by the time this episode drops, it will be 9 days, Sam Bennett days, from opening night, where the Florida Panthers will be facing off against the New York Islanders. But in order to prepare for the season, we want to get a little bit of a pulse check from not only you guys, but also a person who is there in the arena every single day, and it is the public address voice of the Florida Panthers, his third appearance on the show, Andrew Imber. Andrew, welcome back to the show.
I'm glad you keep having me, man. I'm glad I haven't done anything to lose that 3 times the charm thing yet.
Hey, man. When we produce good content, when you come up here on the show, then of course we got to have you back for some more. So I want to start off first with how's your off season? I know you were at basically every single Panther watch party, especially the outdoor one. There's that iconic photo of you with the microphone, like pointing in the direction, like saying, like, "Let's go." So how was your off season?
A lot less exciting than last season. There's no way to go from that. Obviously, everyone knows the season didn't end how we wanted it to, but that first round just brought so much of what so many of us are waiting for such a long time. And in that moment, that point that you're referring to, it was during Game 6 when we actually did advance against Washington. So that was just one of the best nights of my life. And to go from that to the quiet summertime with just not a lot going on was obviously an interesting transition. I tried to keep as busy as possible over the summer. I do announcing for a number of different college and high school teams now. So I'm trying to basically live that dream of announcing all the time, which is very difficult to do. But it's worth it because announcing is when I feel at my absolute best.
Yeah. So last time you were here, we were talking about your versatility with announcing. We were talking about spring training baseball just recently, your first season doing it at the ballpark at the Palm Beaches, some Nova Southeastern games, FAU. But I've seen a little bit how I think you posted the other day doing some high school games, haven't you? Tell us about that experience for you and what you've been doing.
Yeah, I've had a great opportunity to link up with American Heritage out in Delray Beach. Some fantastic people decided that they really wanted to take their program to the next level. And I got contacted and they were like, hey, we'd like to do everything we can to bring you out for football season. And I was like, absolutely. My motto has always been, I don't care the status of what it is. It doesn't have to be pro, it doesn't have to be minors, it doesn't have to be college. Like, as long as people are having fun and they come at me with a plan and a way that makes it work, I'm always there to listen. And it's been a great time announcing for their high school football program. And I hope to do more sports for them as well. And like I said, I've been basically just trying to be all over the state at this point and do every opportunity I can, because there are a lot of people like us who don't enjoy the 9 to 5. And when you don't enjoy the 9 to 5, you have to get very creative to stay away from it. So this is my way of staying away from that.
Mm-hmm. And we were talking a little bit just throughout direct message and all that a few weeks ago, talking about the 9 to 5 that we don't want to have, and also the opportunity to mostly, most of our work happens to be during nighttime, when games are going on. But of course, there's opportunities for multiple games in a day on the weekend. So one day you might be here and then traveling there. And I know you like to hit the gym as well. You of course, you've had that side business of a personal trainer. How does it go for you on the day that you do have multiple games? Because of course, when you're doing multiple games as an announcer, and of course, eating regimen as well changes as well as the travel goes. What's that when you have multiple games in one day?
It's interesting, and it always depends exactly how many games, exactly how many venues, and what's going on. But I think the fun thing, whenever I get to a new location, I think everyone is always blown away. They're like, "Oh, Pollo Tropical's here, or Papa John's is here, or McDonald's is here, or Chick-fil-A is here. Do you want anything?" And my answer every single time is no. And they're like, you don't want anything?" I'm like, "No, I brought my own sandwich. I brought my own power bar. I brought this. I brought that." I mean, I think a lot of people know this by now, but perhaps not. I'll reveal it again. For the last 8 years on the job with the Panthers, I've had a PB&J sandwich before every single game. It's on whole wheat. It's a great way to fill up. It's a great way to know what I'm eating and not make sure that you don't run into any problems. Lord knows I've heard horror stories about announcers eating the cafeteria food at an arena and ending up in the bathroom the whole game, So like, Lord knows that you got to be careful in this business. So I very much make it a point to bring my own stuff every single game, regardless of its high school, college, pro. In terms of in terms of working out, that is always dependent on the situation. I know there was a time a few weeks ago, I did 2 volleyball games in the morning, 10 and 12, came home, went straight to the gym at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, showered, ate something really quick, and then went and did a high school football game at 6:30. So like, it can be crazy days for sure. I'm not saying it's for everybody. And yeah, everyone has time for a rest day here and there. So if it's one of these things where it's just, I have one huge day in that week of announcing and I have like 3 gigs and I haven't had a rest day in 3 days, of course I'm going to take the day off. But if it's one of those things where, hey, I got my goals in mind, I got a race coming up, I had to take a day off 2 days ago, I don't want to take another one, I'm going to prioritize a way to make sure that I am able to get there.
And sometimes if you have a game even earlier than that, like an 8 a.m. game, I want to know if you don't have that time gap in between another game, do you go to the point where you go to the gym at like 4 a.m., 5 a.m.? Because I've done that before. The waking up part is the hard part, but it's like once you get up and actually do it, then that is a great place for someone to start their day.
Sure. So I'm not a morning person at all. I have never been to the gym before noon, probably, I would admit. In extreme circumstances and taking classes, I've taken like a 9 a.m. class somewhere for something where I might be working or doing a special event with them. But in terms of my own training, by choice, I would never end up in that situation. I have had plenty of days where I might have like an 7:30 and 8 o'clock start for my first game to announce. And yeah, there's no way I would end up at the gym before that. I would do everything I can to find time after 3 or 4 games in that afternoon stretch there somewhere, because I just don't do well in the morning. It works for some people, but my energy is way down in the morning.
Mm-hmm. It's for me, it's only a few times a year. It's like it's like whenever it's like whenever you have that, know that you have to, it's like putting like a personal quota of I gotta go to at least this many times a week. So if I know that I have a few things coming up, it's like, oh, I don't want to miss this day. Oh, but I missed this day. And then you're trying to put all that together. So that could be a little bit of like the juggling balance when it comes to announcing at multiple locations. But in segment number 2, we're going to discuss Andrew Imber's reactions through all the various types of moves for the Florida Panthers this summer and what happened. And and give the floor to him in as far as his reactions. But first, we're going to tell you all about Built Bar. And Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar on the planet. And and here's a trick for all of you guys out there. If you want to make your Built Bar a little bit more chewy, put your Built Bar for 8 seconds in the microwave and taste that delicious chewiness that Built Bar has to offer. There's many great flavors. You could even get a mix box of 12. You could get the new cookie dough chunk puff from Built Bar as well. There's many flavors. And if you go to built.com and use the promo code LOCK15, you could get 15% off your order. Once again, when you use promo code LOCK15 at built.com, you can get 15% off your order at built.com. Back on this Tuesday, October 4th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, I got the public address announcer of the Florida Panthers, Andrew Imber, here on the show. And I want to get your reaction on the Matthew Tkachuk trade, where you were, and was it a thing where you happened to be up, or was it something that you found out the next morning about when this trade went down?
Oh, of course I was up. Contrary to not being a morning person, I'm very much a night owl. So ironically, I was in the middle of a Twitch stream. So I was live on camera as I'm like reading these tweets. I'm like this. At first, the way it was presented, someone said something about Tkachuk to the Panthers, and I was like, ha, 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 like very funny. And as it broke more and more from check marks on Twitter, I had to basically pause. I didn't pause the broadcast, but I was very much living it in the moment as it was unfolding. It was probably the most awkward place to be actually live on camera as this is happening. So yeah, I found out that night.
Yeah. And from what I've observed of Twitch streaming and all that, at least from a consumer aspect of it, and seeing how the host has to consistently chat with the people doing the comments, having different tabs open at the same time as well, and conduct and chatting at the same time. And of course, you with your presence on social media, you're going to have a lot of Panther followers there as well. So I could only imagine how you didn't really believe it at first, and then having to check it and talk at the same time into the microphone, and having two heads pretty much in two different places. I could only imagine how it was raw reaction that people saw, first of all. But second of all, to kind of compose yourself, because you were seeing what went out in that trade. Two players that you've announced so many times in your career with Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar. I can only imagine how difficult that must have been also to see what was coming out.
Of course. It didn't seem real at first. Absolutely. It seemed like a fantasy trade because it was just so many high-end pieces, the kind of trade that just doesn't happen all that often in real life. And yeah, I would say at least half my viewers on Twitch are Panthers fans. So I'm dealing with, some are crying, some are excited, some are, all this stuff in the chat while I'm internalizing my own feelings. It was definitely a very just a one-of-a-kind situation that I can't imagine will ever quite happen in that same way again. But yeah, I mean, you couldn't ask for a weirder place for me to be when that broke.
Yeah, and for me, it was getting ready for bed to go to work the next morning. Was going to go to bed at 11, ended up going to bed at 3 a.m. because I was just checking the Twitter, trying to see every single reaction, trying to get in contact with different people as far as knowing like what it's going to bring to the table and all. So that really threw everyone off guard. As far as I'm not going to ask you to do an announcement of Matthew Tkachuk's name on the show. I want you to save that for when he actually scores his first goal as a Panther. But as far as when a new face comes to the team, how does Imber go about practicing a new name? Is it just at a red light, just driving around, or is it just looking at yourself in the mirror and saying Matthew Tkachuk's name, or something. How does that process go?
There's definitely an element of driving. Yeah, if I'm on a road trip or something and I got a few hours in the car, and I think I've mentioned this once or twice before, but instead of singing in the shower, I've been known to announce in the shower. So I will sometimes practice while showering. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting because sometimes you get it in your head and you're like, I got to try this 3 or 4 different ways. And then other times you don't even feel like you want to do it until it's in that moment. And you just want to hear how it comes out in the moment for the first time. So there are a few names that I don't even practice, and I'm just like waiting for that first moment to hit, and whatever comes out. And maybe it'll be this. Maybe it'll be what happens for the next 10 years, or maybe it'll be the only time it ever sounds like that. So there's definitely it's completely dependent on the situation. But yeah, if I'm practicing, generally car rides, shower, get a few of those practicing. If I should draw out the first name, if I should draw out the first syllable of the last name, how are we going to do this kind of thing? That's generally the way I do it.
And sometimes you might hold the first part of someone's name a little longer, the last part of their name, and it's also situational, like we've talked about before, of like if it's a game-winning goal, or or we've talked about also the situations that come with the Panthers, how if the Panthers are being blown out, then you might not hold it as long because of course you're reading the reaction of the crowd as well. And also I remember this as well. When I was working behind the scenes at Golf Television and seeing different introductions of like sponsors, we've had to do 3 or 4 different takes from the voiceover person that they would call. I never actually asked where their location was, but it was just a person on the other line who does voiceovers for like so many different stations, and having to do 3 or 4 different takes of one sentence in a different tone. So you might say something out loud and you might say, "Oh, I don't like how that sounds," or but also this. I also want to ask you this as well. Is it really when you announce a name for the first time in the arena, is it really saying, "Oh, is this what Andrew feels good about," or do you really ask the people around you? Because the in-game presentation, do you ask them, "Hey, how does that sound?" Is it really going with your gut?
Honestly, I think the whole time it's really been how I feel. I mean, granted, there have bing times where I will ask, the people I'm working with, the people around me, "Hey, what did you think about this? Are you down with the swagger call?" So, and stuff like that. But yeah, I would say 9 times out of 10, if not more, it comes down to how I feel, because I think I've gotten to the point where I'm like, okay, I can see this worked, or I can see this could be better. And so I generally listen to my own gut, because, I mean, in all honesty, yes, other opinions are very important, but I also have to be the authority in the room when it comes to the announcing, because the DJ is an expert at music, but not at announcing, and the game pres director is an expert at directing, but maybe not at announcing. So like, I am where the buck stops with that. So I need to make sure that I'm comfortable in my own shoes with how I'm putting all the names out there.
Okay. And of course, I can only imagine how when you first started, it was maybe a little bit of asking, and then, hey, as you've gone on, because we're now entering 2022-23, so now 7 seasons with the team. 7.
This is number 8.
This number 8. And speaking of your 8th season, I want to ask you, who was the first person you contacted before you posted it on Twitter announcing that you were coming back as the public address announcer for the Panthers? Who was the first person you reached out to?
I don't even remember, because it's a good question. The funny thing is that, like, so there are situations where someone might come in and sign some papers and take a picture, kind of thing. Like, in the past with the Panthers, it's been very informal, and this season was a little bit more. But there isn't really that, "Hey, Andrew, like, this is so and so, like, you're back." Like, that has not happened. So it's not like this magical moment. It's more just me kind of getting the hint, like, "Hey, I'm starting to get contacted about preseason. I'm starting to get contacted about my schedule." Like, can I assume that we're going down this route kind of thing? So it maybe does not have that moment that you're kind of looking for where it's like, hey, just wanted to let you know you're back for season 8. Like, let's get ready to roll. And then I'm like, yes. And I call my mom or, kind of thing like that generally has not happened. It's really just the momentum is gathering and gathering as we're starting to touch base with some people during the off season and they're starting to talk about meetings and preseason and stuff like that. And I just kind of, at that point, I'm like, I hope I'm in,
Yeah.
And
okay.
And it's so game to game that honestly, I've really just adopted the whole, I'm just happy to be there every single night. And I call every game like it's my last. And I hope that I am able to do it forever. And if I'm able to call every game like it's my last forever, like it's going to lead to a lot of amazing moments. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, and you spoke about it, getting into the routine, because of course during the summer you're doing your own thing. You might not be getting the emails from the from your bosses and all, and then when you get that first email, you probably think to yourself, "Oh, it's go time." So in the third and final segment, we're going to discuss preparation for the season for Andrew Imber, and also maybe a little bit of a curveball question that I am going to throw at Imber in the third and final segment. So we're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast on this Tuesday, October 4th. I have Andrew Imber, the public address announcer for the Florida Panthers. So we were discussing a little bit in the previous segment about getting those emails and then preparing. It's go time. It's go time. So we already have a preseason game under our belt, and we were messaging a few times for in between about when would be a good date. And one of the messages that I got from you was about a recording, a night of recording. Is like, no, I can't, because we're doing rehearsal at the arena. So I want to ask you about that night, because of course, once you're in the routine, you show up, of course, a few hours before. You would say 3 hours. You say you arrive 3 hours, right?
About 2.5 to 3 for games.
2.5, 3. Okay. So I want to ask you, what is that first rehearsal like the day before the actual first game? Because of course you're preparing for the season. Of course there might be different things that go on as far as the in-game experience. But what is that first day as far as the rehearsal is like for you?
I hate to give a terrible answer, but rehearsal actually got canceled because of Hurricane Ian. So we actually didn't do anything this year. That's not to say that we might not before the regular season, but we didn't have a preseason rehearsal. And sometimes in the past years we haven't anyway. So it's really just situational. It depends who's at the helm. It depends how they want to go about getting everyone together and going over some things. Generally, it does happen before the regular season because there's so many more elements. There's so many more videos and smoke and lights and darkness and all sorts of really cool effects. So I'm guessing that the preseason this year was just to kind of get everyone back on the same page. But yeah, unfortunately, Ian was a little too close at that moment, and so they played it safe, and better safe than sorry, and we didn't have that rehearsal.
Got you. So. And I'm sure you will have some type of rehearsal, especially with the Panthers starting the season on a 3-game road trip right before home opener against the Philadelphia Flyers at FLA Live Arena, a nationally televised game too for the Panthers. So everyone watching on the national stage will get to hear Imber's call on a goal. So the Panthers decide to do something a little different this year. It was officially confirmed, where they will not be doing the goal song of Sweetness as far as their main goal song. So Brandon Montour and Sam Bennett got on the board on Thursday night against Carolina. So we saw their custom songs for that preseason game. Sam Bennett's song was "Benny and the Cats" by Elton John. He spoke about how he had that song in Calgary. Brandon Montour had the song "It's Rock and Roll to Me" by Billy Joel. So pretty cool that these guys get to have their own custom song, and it's a rarity in the NHL, but something that's not too common, but it does happen on rare occasions. But I want to ask you, this is the curveball that I'm throwing at you, Imber. If you had a goal song, what would yours be?
Okay, so I had about 20 seconds to think, because as you started to pose that question, I was like, I bet this is the curve. All right. I feel like my default in the past, because I feel like this can double as like your walk-up song, your goal song, like kind of that kind of thing. In the past, I've always gone with 50 Cent In the Club, because I just feel like it's got such a nice beat, and it's like, go, go, go. Like, I feel like it can really get the people going and stuff. So I think I got to stick with that, and what also people, a little underrated part of that song is he actually says "go shorty." So if they score a shorthanded goal, if I'm scoring a shorthanded goal, go shorty, it has a double entendre there.
That's a good way of looking at it for you, if you were to score like a shorthanded goal, and you score a goal, they say we're gonna party like it's your birthday. So hey, it's a celebration. Everyone go skates by the bench. Everyone does a fist bump. So and usually in the song, as far as a celebration, usually that's the direction it goes. So that was a song that I was not thinking of. Me, I thought about quite a few songs. I think mine would be "Before I Forget" by Slipknot. I think that would be probably my goal song. My walk-up song if I played baseball as well. Just like I think about it like this. If you make a bad play previously, you're gonna remember before you forget, and it's just like I'm gonna find a way to get back into the game, even though it's a 60-minute game. This previous part of the game does not define me. I'm gonna find a way to recover. And if you have a baseball reference, if you're so far 0 for 4 and you get a chance in the 9th inning, you have a chance to make something happen even later. So that would probably be my song for my goal song / walk-up song. But so Andrew, next one, before we get out of here, you've spoken about how you've really gotten the hang of announcing mostly basketball as like your favorite sport outside of hockey, because you're constantly in the action. When you're doing baseball, you're more chillaxed. We spoke about how you were watching some of the Panther comeback wins last time around on your phone while you were at the ballpark of the Palm Beaches. Is there any new sport that we haven't talked about yet that you've kind of gotten into that you say, maybe I might get into this outside of actually announcing a game?
I think because I've taken on a lot of sports now. I've done everything: hockey, basketball, football, baseball, soccer, volleyball, lacrosse, like basically everything you can think of at this point. In terms of public address specifically, of all the sports that I've kind of dove into for the first time, I think I've actually developed a bit of an affinity for volleyball, because it is another one of those sports where it's just server's name, who got the points. So it's I always love the sports where it's let's be happy for the home team, let's be monotone for the road team. So in volleyball, it's very much an excited our name for when we're serving, really excited when we get the point. When the other team gets the point, super monotone. When the other team's serving, super monotone. And that's basically all the volleyball is, from the PA perspective, at least how I do it. So I've definitely grown to really enjoy volleyball. I've been doing FAU this year for that. So yeah, I would say of all the new sports that I've done, that has been the most, the one that I've grown to like the most in that role.
You know, it's funny because one thing I don't understand about volleyball as a sport is how the rotations work with who serves next, who goes where. So the very few volleyball matches that I've seen, I was like, who goes where? But I'm sure as you've announced, you know who's going to go in what position next, who's next to serve, and I believe you have to hit it 3 times, right, before getting it over in the net, right?
Maximum 3 times. You can hit it right back over, but you can't take more than 3 hits.
Okay. Yeah, volleyball is definitely not a sport that I watch too often. But hey, I'm glad that for you, getting to announce volleyball has helped you definitely get into that sport more. I've always wondered what announcing cricket would be like, because I've watched baseball most of my life, and watching sports like cricket and watching sports like rugby as well. You see a few highlights, but firstly, for me, those are sports that I personally don't get. Have you been reached out to like other sports like cricket or rugby before?
I have never heard from either of those two. No cricket, no rugby. But I think at this point, my MO is like, I'll try anything once in the announcer world for sure. Like I've brought, and like you, I've been doing volleyball for a month or two now. There are still rules I don't get. There are times where the refs blow the whistle for like some kind of net violation, and I'm just like, all right, he pointed that way. I'm going to call a point for that team, but I have no idea what just happened. So I mean, yeah, you're living in the moment with some of these sports, and I don't quite understand all the intricacies of some of the ones that I haven't been around my whole life. But it's an excuse to learn a little bit more about some interesting sports.
That's good, and that in itself makes you well versed. So this is the thing, because you have grown that resume with announcing so many different sports. If people want your services, saying, "Hey, you want high quality announcing? This is what I do. This is how much you're gonna have to put forward in order for, if you want me." And hey, all they have to see is I'm an NHLPA announcer for the Florida Panthers, and hey, they know that regardless, you're gonna put on a good show. One more thing. I saw that even that you were announcing Miami FC at FIU. A little Shula Bowl conflict in this show, as I'm an FIU grad and Imber is a FAU grad. So I noticed that in soccer specifically, there's a lot, just like baseball. The announcer's not really talking as much as well, but kind of like hockey, when the referee has like how many more minutes of stoppage time, a substitution, a lot of also in those moments you're announcing it as play is going. So how has that been as like a different like change of pace for you?
Yeah, I mean, soccer is interesting to me because, I mean, there's no secret the World Cup is coming to the United States in 4 years, and I would very much like to be a part of that. So I've been all too willing to get involved. I've been doing FAU men's and women's soccer when I can, and I had the chance to fill in for Miami FC a couple weeks ago, and it's definitely interesting. There are huge breaks potentially. Like you could legitimately go the first half without saying anything if there's no goals, no substitutions. They put no stoppage time on. Like you could basically do nothing for the entire first half. And it's a low scoring sport. And besides that, it's really just goals, cards, substitutions, and the occasional marketing read, depending upon where you are. It's been interesting. I can't say that it's my favorite sport to announce from that perspective, but I'm enjoying the new opportunities I'm getting with that, and I'd like to become better at it and learn it a little bit better, just in case I do get blessed with an opportunity to work some major events in the future.
And hopefully World Cup 2026 is calling your name, and because Hard Rock Stadium will be hosting some games for the World Cup. So I'm hoping that you eventually do get the gig. And man, how awesome would that be for you to get that gig?
That would be probably one of 2 lifelong dreams come true there. So I mean, I at this point, I've got I've got what I've always wanted in terms of professional sports. So it's really just if I can get the World Cup, if I can get the Olympics, I would be a very happy man.
It'll be the icing on the cake, that's for sure. So, anyway, Andrew, I want to thank you so much for joining this episode of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Tell everybody where they can find you and anything that you might offer as far as PA announcing gigs or even personal trainer. Tell them if anyone wants any of that information. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, you can get at me, especially on Twitter and Instagram at Imber Voice, IMBER Voice. You can also get me on Twitch at Imber Voice, where I stream most Friday nights, assuming there's not a conflict of events. I have been basically offering up for any sort of announcing. So if you're a principal at a school and you want to get your sporting events to the next level, again, doesn't matter what level we're talking about. If you want it to sound professional, like I'm doing with American Heritage High School right now, I'm definitely game. So feel free to message me on those platforms, Twitter, Instagram, at Imber Voice, and we can see if I can come aboard and help out your sporting events. And again, I do basically every sport at this point. So I am open to any sort of experiences within that.
Awesome, Andrew. Thank you so much and hope to have you on soon.
Anytime, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast so you'll be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steele Roden. We'll be covering all the preseason activities around the National Hockey League. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On NHL. Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast Monday through Friday. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast. So I'm Armando Velez with Andrew Imber. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.